If you're in financial services and you're noticing that it's getting harder to acquire and retain customers, you need to know about Finimize. Finimize creates the world's most engaging finance content for retail investors, and you can now white label it for your platform. Get access to a library of over 20,000 news, analysis, and education pieces written by former Wall Street analysts with the retail investor in mind. Not only does the access via API or manual download mean simple, fast integration to your platform, but features like advanced tagging let you easily personalize it to your customers' portfolios and preferences. With content available in over 29 languages, it's never been easier to supercharge your brand with content that resonates globally. Find out how Finimize can grow your brand or elevate your content at finimize.com/business.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm David Barton-Grimley, Fintech Strategy Director right here at 11FS. And today we have an interview with Lori Schwartz, who at the start of the year has taken on the role of Global Head of Treasury Services at JP Morgan Payments. On this episode, we're going to talk about Lori's new role, the innovation happening in the treasury services and payment space, and how to be innovative at a huge organization such as JP Morgan more generally. It's great to have you on the show with us, Lori. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Right, let's dive in. So let's just start with a little bit about you. So for our listeners who might be unaware, can you tell them what Global Head of Treasury Services does?
Absolutely. So I have the privilege every day of running a global payments franchise. And so what does that mean is we help clients and companies all over the world take in money, manage money, and then ultimately pay out money. Compound that by $10 trillion a day, 30 plus countries in which we operate, 120 different currencies in which we support. It makes for some interesting stuff.
Wow. And I mean, that's just huge. And so what would success look like in your role? Like, I guess, keeping the global financial system moving?
I think it, simply put, is we want to be there for our clients where they are on their payments journey. So whether that's reaching a new market through a cross-border payment or an FX transaction or exploring things like new alternative methods of payments, wallets, and otherwise, we expand with our clients and we endeavor to help them run their businesses every day and expand more recently their business opportunities with the explosion of e-commerce.
Yeah. And so this is a new role for you, I understand.
It is.
Although you've been at JP Morgan for quite a long time now. I mean, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen since you walked through the door at JPM to now?
Yeah, so it's been 12 years with JP Morgan. I've always been in one way, shape, or form connected to the payments and specifically the treasury services business. But I grew up in liquidity, as I like to say. I think the biggest change has really been the payments revolution. So the core of our business has always been large B2B payments, an enormous, what we call correspondent banking franchise. So effectively helping banks move money around the world and access the US dollar, euro, sterling markets. And over the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years, it's really been about the explosion of how we can actually do that at broad scale for global corporates as well, and embracing all different types of payments. So whether it's the B2B, which is still core and super important, but also C2B, B2C, and just really helping money move around the world.
Amazing. And we noticed that although you're based in New York, you used to live in London, and obviously we're recording this here today in sunny London. So JPM is obviously huge in America. I mean, is part of your remit growing JPM's treasury services in Europe and beyond?
Absolutely. So we are, yes, a U.S. bank, but we have global operations around the world. So last month, I was in Asia working with our Asia franchise. In 2 weeks, I'll be headed to Brazil. And it's really important because not just do we help our clients and do we operate across multiple geographic locations, but we also have teams everywhere. So getting there, connecting with them, hearing what's going on the ground and learning, because at the end of the day, while there's a lot of benefits in our global franchise, we'll talk, I hope, about how we deliver on that technology, we actually commercialize and deliver in every country in which we operate. And so, exploring, traveling around, seeing the teams is super important. It was a little sunny over the weekend, so we had a little bit of British sun. But I love coming back to London. I did live here, actually 2 stints, most recently for 5 years. And London and the entire European region is super important to JP Morgan Payments growth. We have a well-established franchise in many locations supporting all the biggest and many of the emerging middle market clients, and we're continuing to invest and grow.
You mentioned a bit earlier there about how the payments ecosystem has changed quite a lot since back in the day, and one of the things that we're here to talk about is innovation, right? And where innovation sits in, I suppose, both within your role and within Treasury in general. And I think probably one of the biggest things that we certainly hear from very large organizations managing innovation is it's extremely risky, right? If you're a very small startup, it's very easy. You can fail fast. You can do all of those kind of things. But at JP Morgan, it must be so complex, right? The risk management component in particular. I mean, how do you think about straddling that line of risk management versus innovation in payments?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think there's innovation and it's important, right? And whether it's, phrased under, we have to disrupt ourselves before we're not disrupted by someone else, there is just an inordinate amount of support at the organization all the way, top down, right? But we are big, and so we want to make sure we innovate responsibly. Now, I think actually being of the size and scale of JP Morgan allows us to do that with extraordinary resources to think about, if there's areas of opportunity or places of change, what is that from an opportunistic perspective, but also what are the risks that we're familiar with and how do we need to control them? So whether it's a line of distinction and we need to balance between, or the fact that actually to innovate successfully, you have to be risk-minded, I think we do a pretty good job striking that balance. And there is a significant support throughout the organization to fail fast, right? We will try ideas. If we try it, if everything we try is completely successful, we haven't tried enough. If everything we try fails, we're probably trying too much. And so we try to figure out between the balance on the two. But innovation in this space, I mean, whether or not we choose to, we have to. And I think that's where there's been a lot of great connection to many of your listeners in kind of learning from how they've been approaching it. And one area that I've always found so remarkable with banking is we really didn't clue in early enough to the importance of the customer experience, right? We focus so much on the core capability. Can we make the transaction occur? Can we give you a report on your balances in your account? But actually, as digitization in the business has completely grown and become increasingly more relevant, that customer experience has been critical to not just the growth of companies, but the innovation and then the success of the adoption. And I think, a little late to the start, but we're getting there and can learn a lot along the way.
I feel like the whole industry, in a way, is catching up. And when I say industry, I mean like Treasury services and B2B banking in general. Because when you think about customer, centric thinking or innovating for the customer, a lot of that started, I guess, with retail banking. And so it's kind of amazing to see big organizations like yourselves actually say, no, there are not only one customer with B2B, there's multiple stakeholders. So have you seen that kind of almost aha moment, that shift in actually, we need now to really think about customer innovation, but also that it actually results in a successful change or a successful innovation for a multiple series of stakeholders? I guess it's just much harder, right? It's much harder to think because there's so many different stakeholders involved in Treasury services and in payments.
Stakeholders at our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So, if we were talking, 5-7 years ago, and frankly, probably wouldn't have been that interested to talk to me at that time, but I say in jest, we would have been predominantly and solely focused on the corporate treasurer, the cash manager, and both from a financial and operating treasury. And by the way, those roles remain hugely, totally, and utterly important. And oftentimes, I think what we're helping those stakeholders at the company do is introduce automation to drive efficiencies within their cash management practices. And that is critical because the parallel that's become so interesting is companies themselves, their business is becoming all about money. not just how much they're making on it, but actually transacting in the flow of that money, whether it be through digital wallets or e-commerce expansion. The experience of the transaction is critical to the success of the sale. And therefore, the role of the corporate treasurer is become inextricably tied with someone like the chief product officer.
Yeah.
And so helping the treasurer speak the product officer's language, helping the product officer understand why the treasury component is so important, right? If you've got tens of thousands of transactions going through and you can't reconcile, you're going to have an issue. By the way, it's your treasury that's doing that work for you. And then, kind of draw the triangle all the way through the technology departments of these companies, because a lot of the solutions that they're building, but also that we're kind of coming in and helping serve, all culminate in the technology itself. And so I find we're at a really interesting part of that dialogue because we see all sides of it. Well, we're on our own technology, transformation, modernization as well. And so helping everyone understand why those stakeholders are there, what role everyone's playing, and how you can actually drive to mutually beneficial outcomes. It's definitely made for a few more conversations along the way, but I think it's also made for much more interesting discussions.
And these problems are not, problems or opportunities, I guess, are not simple, right? Like tech is really hard. It's hard for businesses, large and small, to try to figure out. And I can imagine the payments infrastructure is just so complex. So trying to figure out where the innovation lies requires almost that sort of systems level view that you can dive in and say, well, here is something we've seen, let's change that. And let's make these very specific changes. It must just be so fascinating to see that systems view.
Yeah, we have a high degree of respect for our technology organization. But I think it's also about how we think about what we're building and how we can improve the solutions for our clients as well. So, at the end of the day, we are moving money, making payments. And that is a very, there are rules by which you have to do that. There is increasingly time frames by which you have to do that. But also, there is risk, as you alluded to before, in a different way throughout that entire cycle because money is moving. And so finding ways to add value in that transaction, whether that be through things like we've launched accounts validation services. If you're sending money, you want to make sure it's getting to the right place, or improving fraud monitoring tools so that you can identify where there's potential issues in the system. We complement that with a lot of go-to-market solutions for our clients as well. We do an enormous amount of our technology investment is also around just helping clients manage visibility, control, and optimization of their cash. Because at the end of the day, every payment starts and stops with liquidity. It needs to be funded. It needs to be reconciled. And so a lot of those solutions, which we've grown up, and I think where the strength as being a bank provider comes, is we understand the importance of managing that money, that working capital. We ourselves have to do it, and therefore we can adapt a lot of those tools and solutions, for our clients.
Amazing. So fascinating. And coming up, I continue the conversation with Lori as we take a closer look at the treasury management and payments industry space and what the future holds for it. It's all coming up after this super quick break, so don't go anywhere.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing Trust Center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Welcome back to Fintech Insider Insights, where I'm in conversation with Lori Schwartz, Global Head of Treasury Services at JP Morgan Payments. So before the break, we discussed Lori's role and innovation at JP Morgan, and now we're going to talk about the innovation happening in payments and treasury management more broadly. So we were just starting to talk about this a little bit before the break, so let's just go into it. I mean, what would you say are those kind of key trends in global treasury services? And how are you positioning yourself to stay ahead of that curve? Like, what's next?
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot going on. But we've tried to boil it down to 5 key trends that we're seeing. So firstly is building core strength. Why? Because if we've learned nothing else over the last couple of years, uncertainty exists. And so in a business that does everything from, some of the examples we talked about before, like help businesses grow, accept online payments, it also makes salary payments and supplier payments. And no matter what is going on in the world, those are critical functions to a company. So making sure that our clients have stable cash management strategies that provide visibility, control, and optimization, and that can flex with them during periods of certainty and uncertainty is critical. Second, fortified payments. So we talked a little bit about this, but fraud is at an all-time high, and moving money is a risk, is important, and is critical. And so a lot of the areas of focus and innovation in solutions around the area of trust and safety, how can we add validations and kind of value-added services on top of the payment itself to help our clients fortify their payments? Third, the modernization imperative. Technology.
Yeah.
Right? We have been on a technology revolution, in part spurred by the scale of business growth, in part spurred by the transition to e-commerce, which I'll talk about in a second. And so not just that, do you have good, stable technology? And yes, stability, resiliency, super important, but also are you approaching things with a technology mindset? I mean, I remember the good old days when Agile was coming through. We were just transitioning off of waterfall approach.
Yeah.
And it used to be, right, you decided what you wanted to do, and then you wrote some requirements and you handed them over. I think it's completely fair and totally accurate to say is the quality of your technology and those technicians that you have around you, that is going to be what catapults your business or completely limits it. So super important. Fourth, the commerce revolution, whether that's scale, whether that's client buying behaviors, accessing new markets, and all of the things that need to happen around that. So, a real area of focus and growth for us is embedded finance. Right? Everyone wants to get involved in money in some way, whether it be digital wallets and otherwise, and how can we be a part of that as we need to be and should be, but also it's important to our clients. And then a topic I'd love to go into more detail with you on, which is in payments embrace AI. So it's the 2-letter acronym that's kind of everywhere and anywhere at the moment, whether it be machine learning or otherwise. But there is just, to use a phrase I like, it's like nothing but opportunity in that space. And how do we capitalize on it in a safe way?
I mean, AI, I should say, is one of those things that just gets thrown around so much. And yet it is, as you say, so fascinating. I mean, you must just get asked this so much, right? You must get so many people thinking about AI, talking to you about it. I mean, there are maybe some obvious use cases in, taking out the friction in workflow management and stuff like that everybody kind of talks about. Is there anything that you're seeing that actually, hey, there are some automations that AI can drive that in treasury services could add some serious value?
Yeah, definitely. So we tend to think about AI in 2 components. So leveraging, the artificial intelligence for machines to enhance how human decisioning is made. And so, I roll back the clock. I've been in the broader business for 19 years. And one of the first problems I learned, we help clients solve a problem or capitalize on an opportunity. Here's the problem. Short-term cash flow forecasting is really tough.
Yes.
really tough and also really expensive if you don't get it right. Now, as someone that grew up on the liquidity side of the business, it is humbling when we realize that the most expensive asset that a company holds on its balance sheet is cash on a bank's deposit account. And yet, when you think about the broader banking ecosystem, there's a lot of cash in it. Why? Because cash is king. Cash, is funding their businesses. And it is extremely difficult in the short term to forecast that accurately. I've been through every age and stage and idea of how, going from Excel spreadsheets to history-based logic. And I think it is kind of breathing a new life with the way that technology has just leapfrogged. And so one of the things that we're really excited about is our cash flow intelligence tool. So we've effectively created a way to aggregate an inordinate amount of data, that we have, that our clients provide, create indicative cash flow forecasting. Now, what's special about it is it's not just the past predicting the future, but it's actually the system getting smarter as time goes on. There's actually multiple different bots that are kind of competing with each other to see who's right. And so the question is, well, how do they know if they're right? There's actually a user interface that our clients can use, and they can, with the purview of using this to inform decision makings, they can go in and say, oh, wait, no, that was a dividend payment. It happens every quarter. It's going to be a one-off. Or, yes, this was actually the cash position I had. So it's data-based. It's got multiple different algorithms working, competing to be right. And then it's got still that human component of touch. And the accuracy that we're seeing with clients and the adoption is extremely high. So, to think it took us nearly 20 years, but we might have actually started to crack the nut on solving one of these biggest and very expensive challenges for corporate treasurers.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's something pretty incredible about the natural language flow that comes from generative AI, which is able to just structure very complex information and take action off the back of it. And, you mentioned embedded finance just now as well. And that sort of leads to, well, what do we then do with this information that we have on cash flow? And kind of one of the natural things that you go to is, well, we can provide, say, cash flow financing for the business immediately if we're able to understand what's going on in the business, and then maybe embed that in whatever platforms they use. So it's just such a service like that can then extend into all sorts of different types of businesses.
It absolutely can. And I want to go back because you said, and I'll paraphrase, but please correct, there's kind of the standard use cases of it, improves the operational workflow. And that's true. And that's probably the most established part. And it's the second area in how we think about it is how you create intelligent decision engines that can kind of then make the decision themselves. But maybe just a little bit of context. That is, I guess today, probably the most important application for us as a business, because when we think about all that goes into the payment and all the ways, for many of the reasons we've discussed, that we try to help clients optimize those payments, mitigate the risk on those payments, if we had not invested early on, and quite emotionally in a good way, on using machine learning and AI to improve the way that those flows work. Think of things like fraud patterns. To be able to ingest that in the right way, to be predictive, not just because someone over here once paid to that account and then it had an issue, but also to understand what behavior looks like, what is an anomaly. And doing that has helped us scale the business. It's helped us reduce false positives. So put that, back to what's happening universally. Money needs to move faster. The expectation is there, the demand is there, and in some locations, the requirement is there. You try to meet a 10-second rule, or even in some cases, a 3-second rule to complete a payment, and balance all of the security measures that you want on top of that. If we didn't have those applications, that experience wouldn't culminate together. So I think it's still, it's hugely important to the business.
And doing that, I just want to pick up on what you said about doing that is based on strong foundations, right? That has taken JP Morgan years to do, as you say, right? And it's based on the models that you've been running and the volume of data that you have. Like, doing this kind of stuff isn't easy. And I feel like sometimes, particularly with the Gen AI trend coming in, sometimes people think, oh, well, we can just run a simple model on this or just use it and we can solve the problem. But when you're talking about payments infrastructure, when you're talking about it in a global way, you need to make those investments as a business to get to where you've ended up, which is amazing. I want to rewind also back into e-commerce, because I think the point that you made is so true and real, in that businesses are digitizing. The way that they are selling is digitizing. They are selling more on e-commerce in a way that hasn't happened before, I guess, which is a sort of a weird thing, right? Because e-commerce has been around for forever, really. It's been, at least the last 20, 30 years. But it is still growing and changing. And we were lucky enough to come down to your payments conference early this year and got into the weeds on biometric payments and how all of that kind of stuff worked. And let's just talk about biometric payments, because you mentioned fraud, for example, as being a huge concern. What's happening in the biometric field that's interesting for you?
What's not happening in the biometric field that's interesting? I mean, it's kind of amazing. As we, and I come from the U.S., so I'm very used to my credit card. I'm proud to say I don't write checks anymore, but we still process a heck of a lot of them. But the means in which you authenticated, the user, or the maker of the payment to the actual owner of the card was still very much historically based on a signature, which, carry that thought as you see fit to do. We never really embraced chip and PIN in the US. It kind of, the technology leapfrogged beyond. And I think what's so exciting about the biometric space is you're really improving the authentication factor of that payment. And so it's been exciting for us. We were at F1 last year in Miami, prototyping, rolling out, where individuals could come up and actually, through their face, they could enroll with a payment method and then go and purchase a hat and a couple other things just by using their face. And I'm going to venture to say, without having done the research myself, it's easier to copy someone's signature than it is to copy someone's face.
Yeah.
And I think not just does that create a easier user experience, right? Our wallets have been able to get smaller, which is kind of nice. But also it creates opportunities to introduce risk or decrease risk in the process. And I think that's just super exciting. But your point before, if I could just go slightly back, because you're right. None of these things come to fruition overnight. And it can be, with an innovative mindset, I think sometimes a little frustrating. Time takes time. You got to invest. You have to have the right foundations. But it does pay to be big, because you can commit to that. And one of the things that we're very proud of, and I think you see illustrated so clearly in the payment space, is we are committed to this business. We are going to make the investments. We are going to try a whole bunch of things. We're going to focus on our client, their user experience, and in many cases also co-develop with our clients. What do you need? How is it working for you? The uniqueness of us having a merchant acquiring business directly within our payments business allows that full ecosystem to come to fruition, so that every manner of accepting the payment to making the payment, and being really smart about the technology that underpins the business.
That's so fascinating. And I think, it's important also to mention that all of these trends we're talking about are still in flux. Like, the job isn't done, right? Because everything is changing. Yeah, definitely not, right? And so it's interesting to see then what things look like in the future. So I just want to wrap up with, if it's even possible, because we've been talking about so many different things, is there just one piece of advice or lesson that you've learned at JPM or throughout your career that you can share with our listeners?
Run the numbers, trust your gut.
Amazing. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that wraps up today's discussion. And a big thank you to our special guest this week, Lori. Thank you so much for joining me. Where can people connect and find out more about you?
Well, thank you so much. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, but you can also find more about the business at jpmorgan.com/payments.
Amazing. And you can find me on LinkedIn at DavidBG. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make it better and helps others find the show. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider or email podcasts@11fs.com. Thanks very much and goodbye.
Whether you're starting or scaling your company's security program, demonstrating top-notch security practices and establishing trust is more important than ever. Vanta automates compliance for ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, and more, saving you time and money while helping you build customer trust. Plus, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing Trust Center, all powered by Vanta AI. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our audience gets a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.